Well, I fortunately grew up in a home with a father who talked. That's a rare thing, of course, having a father presiding at a dinner table talking about world affairs. Rare in our society, I believe. They'd rather talk about football, baseball, basketball, or some drinking buddies carousing together. So I had a smattering of knowledge of what made the world tick then, even though I was only 18 years old. But I can't say that I could have been construed as an expert in any area concerning politics or history or what was currently happening in the world.
But you were aware that the world was at war.
Oh, of course. I grew up with a father who talked and who was familiar, even though he had no formal education beyond the third grade, but who was more brilliantly educated than most graduates, postgraduates in the educational field. In
But did you have a sense that war was going to come to the United States?
not come to the United States, no, but war was definitely in our future.
Because of the Battle of Britain and
Well, my dad background was from Ireland, who had been slaves for 700 years of the British. And they, I hate to use the word, but I think most of the Irish in the southern counties hated the British because of the way the British had treated them. So it was not from ignorance, it was from firsthand abuse that they felt this way.
people forget that Ireland was neutral during World War II.
So, was there much attention paid to Asia at the time among the discussion with your father?
At our dinner table?
Yeah,
Oh, very much. My father recorded speeches, and I still have the 78 records, little, oh, I guess they're a 10-inch disc, that, weren't they about that size?
78 RPM.
Yeah, 78 RPM, but about so big. Yeah. That he made in an attempt to raise funds to help the Chinese. And the gist of the speeches was that the Chinese are being slaughtered over there. That was one of his favorite expressions, over there. And he dwelled on the fact that the Japanese were buying up all the scrap iron and using it to kill the Chinese. But in the society of the 30s in the United States, no one gave a damn about the Chinese, much less worrying about them being slaughtered. They had no idea really who they were except these caricatures in films, which were, of course, very deceiving,
yes.
very ignorant by themselves.
So, was your father's activities through an organization like a church or?
No, except he was a member of a famous Irish organization, which today is still very popular, the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick.
And what part of the United States was that?
Greenwich, Connecticut.
Okay, so
Yeah.
already okay.
They have those chapters all
Yeah,
over the country,
yeah.
I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. But he actually was enlightened far more than you could say 98% of the American people or more, even into the intelligentsia.
Right.
the military, of course, had knowledge of what was going on militarily in the world, and actually were playing sort of summer campy games because they had no money for purchase of modern armaments or raising the numbers of people in the military to sufficient levels to present any reasonable defense of our country, even though they're charged with defending this republic. Democratic Republic is their most important first responsibility as senators and members of the House. But they've forgotten that. That's their first and most foremost responsibility. Making sure that no one enemy in any form destroys what we have, which is unique in the world. It's still in the experimental stage. It's very young relation to Japan or China. It's infinitesimal as far as its knowledge and age and seasoning this society that we're blessed to be a part of.
It's very interesting to know that this largely Irish American organization become involved in aiding the Chinese and
Not organizations. My dad specifically,
okay. Just
I never heard him mention
others in the-
anything about any organization.
Was he involved with the church?
No.
Because churches were.
He had no tolerance for the religious part of the society.
Really? Wow.
Wow. Because I know at churches missionaries were always coming
Yes.
through and telling about the story. In my husband's family, his grandfather had been in China, and during the 30s, his great aunt was head of the hospital in Changsha, and so all sorts of letters would come back. And actually, there's a book of her letters.
You represented an infinitesimally minute piece of history or knowledge about the Far East. The American people were totally ignorant about the
So how do
world
you think your
Far East.
father got the information about Asia? Is it through radio? Is it through reading the newspaper?
radio and newspapers.
Newspapers.
And talking to everyone on earth. He was an internationally renowned fashion designer and marketer, women's fashions,
Okay.
in his day.
Okay.
It faded away, of course, unfortunately.
Interesting.
They
Yeah.
did the Timothy
He
Crowley
acted alone, and he funded himself to do
lace
this. So he wasn't
Oh,
part
yeah.
of an organization.
collars and cuffs.
Okay.
And women at one time
Right.
wore that.
Kelly, my bride, reminded me my dad did it all out of his own pocket. No contributions, no organization. At the peak, he had a fleet of trucks he chartered with the broadcast equipment, which was primitive in those days, blasting out his speeches and parading all through the lower Connecticut area. And they all called him a crackpot, of course. That crackpot Crowley. Go along was the easiest way for people. Don't rock any boats. He never went along. When he heard that I had, with my mother's permission, you required it, enlisted in the military, he became so incensed, he got a hold of his buddy, who was the Attorney General of the United States, to see if he could not get me out of this thing. My father wanted to get me out. So I found out in a strange way that he was interfering with my adventure seeking when I tried to get a military pass to leave the base where I was, and I was turned down, and I asked why, and they tell me, well, someone's been at the headquarters. They didn't tell me who it was. So I marched over to the commanding general. I'm an 18-year-old private without any clout, and I marched over to the commanding general's headquarters to demand an answer why I was suddenly persona non grata and why. So they said, well, it was so and so who wanted, your father had asked him to intercede and help you get out of this military duty. All we want to know is, do you still want to pursue it? And I said, yes. What I primarily wanted to do was do it so I could get a pass to go ashore to see the lights and drink the beer in New Rochelle, New York. Because the island where the military base was lies off New Rochelle.
Yes.
It was
What was
You're
the
in
base
Connecticut.
name?
Fort Slocum, New York. Yeah. Given by the military in perfect condition, gorgeous colonial structures to the city, and they allowed it to rot away. It would never have been permitted in China or Japan or any more civilized nation, I guess. No one revered this beautiful architecture and these structures that had so much history involved in them. So that was the simple truth. There were two other fellows and myself out carousing, as most teenagers were in those days, bar to bar, and we suddenly got the inspiration to try the military, to take a trip. Not from any desire to kill anyone or get involved in any warfare, just to take a long trip. And one of the rules of the Army in those days was that after 1 year, you could actually buy yourself out of your contract of enlistment. So it was similar to our Civil War, when they would pay $200 or $300, I forget what the exact sum was, to someone to serve for you. This rule was put your year in, pay your couple of $100, whatever it was, and wherever you were on a base in the military, they'd send you back to the States then. So that's how war-making a people we were.
And then you didn't receive any training at Fort Slocum.
No training whatsoever. There
What
were
did
no
you do all
schools,
day?
no basic training, no nothing. They issued us a uniform, but we looked like toy soldiers. It's unbelievable today to think, because the military fellows, male and female, are so highly trained, and they have the advantage of going to so many different schools. Next question.
But what did you do all day?
What did you do all day?
Weren't you
did
like
nothing
there for
but
3
dream.
3 months?
As far as I can remember, you were just dreaming about, wow, what have I done? And when the boat we were loaded on, which was an old freighter named after the American medical general who cleaned out the yellow fever to build the Panama Canal, and he solved the problem of yellow fever, Leonard Wood. That was the name of the freighter, that troop ship. Remember the yellow fever? It was called yellow fever. How many it killed in the tropics? It was astronomical. Just like the flu killed far more in World War I than any military action.
It was
collectively.
malaria.
Yeah. So, it was the flu in World War, in the Spanish-American War, I'm sorry.
1918.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then
So you're on the boat.
you're on the boat through the Panama Canal to
Down
San
the East Coast, through the Panama Canal, and up to an island off San Francisco. called Angel Island. We wanted to meet the angels, I guess. That's why we went there. So again, we were forbidden to go ashore. I think they were afraid we would never report back to the ship. And when we were pulling out of New York Harbor past that beautiful lady who symbolizes liberty, we really felt it. That was a
You're leaving home.
churning of the stomach and a wonder, what the hell have I committed myself to? Yeah.
If I can just go back a bit.
Yeah.
When your father talked about the Japanese killing the Chinese over there, did he say anything about what the United States should do about it? Was he in favor of the United States intervening militarily?
Never mentioned that. He was a true pacifist in effect because of the treatment of the Irish people by the British. And when they, as Irish, saw the British uniforms on the streets, that was stirred up the boiling pot of hatred of the symbolism. Whereas most of those kids from England who had the British Army uniforms on, a very high percentage of them were Irish kids. That was strange. But no, he never advocated any military action. Number one, we couldn't, we were too weak. But he simply was trying to wake up the people to the fact that it was happening because of his love of China, his love of the Chinese art. He was a huge collector of Chinese porcelains. And where he got involved with that was from his work as a fashion designer, and which led to painting himself and being a member of many organizations in the art world. So he had quite a familiarity with what China represented and knew the Far East from that. And all he was trying to do was wake the American people up. And I suppose the world at the same time. He was not in the corner when it came to expressing himself. He was up front, calling the spade the spade. But it didn't mean a thing because the American people were beyond understanding anything worldwide.
Just like
Yeah, what's changed?
I'm afraid to say their ignorance level was.
And what was his impression of Japan and the Japanese?
Well, he disliked the concept of Japan doing this intensely, and he didn't like Japanese porcelains as much as he liked Chinese. It was an idiosyncrasy that he preferred the Chinese porcelains. Whereas the Japanese are beautiful art, of course.
Yes.
The
But he didn't-
designs, yeah. What, causes this feeling is anyone's guess.
You might want to take, at least lend to the history department these records so someone could digitize them and study them.
Yeah,
Something to talk about.
yeah, kind of oral history.
Well, when you said your father trying to wake the American people about what's happening.
Wake up!
Wake up.
Right.
Was it the sense that the American society not too upset about the war in China?
Didn't know anything about it, didn't mean anything to them.
So, can we talk later?
Hmm.
As far as most,
I'll call you.
I shouldn't say most, but
Okay.
probably close to 50% of Americans, I believe the figure is accurate, were looked favorably on the National Socialists of Germany. 40% of the American people were German descent. German immigrants came here. And these hate-spouting people did a marvelous job of hypnotizing the American people. And they loved the sound of what we're going to do and how the Jews were at fault for all of this. And when it got down to the point of killing the Jews, it was so beaten into the huge numbers of American people that they didn't give a damn. So
Your dad was just trying to educate.
my father was simply educating, trying, without any formal educational background at all. Third grade, that seemed to be enough because he spoke beautifully and had the vast knowledge. So it would have been a waste of time to go through grade school even for him.
Now, some popular historians make the argument that during the 1930s there was some awakening about this conflict between Japan and China, and promoted by someone like Henry Luce of the Time Life.
He tried.
Right,
Yeah.
and then some talk about the Pearl Buck
Yes.
syndrome. So
She did a great job of awakening people. That's true. But it was primarily more of a fictional aspect to it.
But in society at the time, it may have affected some of the elites, but
Not the mass.
there was not much awareness.
I don't think so.
Interesting.
Beautifully written. Next.
Well, so you then were shipped to the Philippines, yeah?
Yeah,
The same merchant ship?
that was no. From the island
Yeah.
where we were parked in Manila Bay waiting for another ship, we finally found one called the U.S. Grant. It was confiscated from Germany in World War One.
Oh.
It was quite a wreck.
You mean San Francisco?
San Francisco, but it was confiscated after the German surrender. It was part of the reparations. And on the way to the Philippines, we had a huge explosion aboard it in a boiler, and we put into Hawaii, or limped in a typhoon. So it was a very unpleasant voyage between the throwing up the meals and the smell of the steam cooked food and the water sloshing around because we were taking on a lot of water. So it wasn't exactly a happy cruise. But when we pulled into Manila Bay in the harbor, and that beautiful odor of the tropics hit us in the warm weather, wow, we were then impressed.
And that was March 1941.
Yeah.
And what was the explanation that you received for why you and others were being sent to the Philippines at this time?
At that time,
Yes.
simply as replacements. There was a slight turnover, not much, nothing like today.
So it's just a rotation. It wasn't
Yeah.
part of a reinforcement or.
They didn't start getting antsy, I guess you'd use that word as slang, towards an emergency situation developing till approximately May. So it was a couple of months after we arrived, but there was still no urgency, and we still hadn't had the even basic training, nothing.
That's remarkable.
We were living in tents because they hadn't finished building new barracks. There was no money to throw away on frivolous things like wooden barracks for the men who enlisted. There was no practicing with any weaponry.
So you had no training, not even learning to line up or march or.
No, the pilots were only allowed to fly 15 minutes a week, as I recall, was the rule for economy purchases. That's all the fuel they could spare. And those were antique aircraft, relatively speaking antique, who were manufactured for Sweden. They had all Swedish markings of the instruments and so on. And they had no armor around the pilot. And they were more like a pleasure plane for the pilots to fly. They had room for the golf clubs. That was manufactured on Long Island it was a Major Seversky design. He was Russian descent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Alexander
Connecticut,
Seversky.
Sikorsky, yes.
You knew him. Yeah.
Well, no, I didn't know him, but I just know that company.
You knew of him.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and there's some
They're
interesting.
in Connecticut.
Yeah.
How-
Oh,
how-
that's Sikorsky.
Oh, Sikorsky.
This
yeah.
is Seversky.
Oh,
different.
Seversky, okay.
But the unique thing was they were both Russian, and they contributed tremendously to American aviation, world aviation.
And so these Swedish planes were never sent out to Sweden because of the embargo, or I forget exactly. We weren't allowed anymore to send armaments. So with the Swedish markings on the plane and on the instruments, they were sent to the Philippines. And there's some interesting color pictures on the internet of these planes at Nichols Field.
You can see one in the flesh at Wright-Patterson Air Museum.
Oh,
Wright-Patterson Field.
yes, in
Right, yeah.
Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. That was
It's
close.
one actually, I believe, from
Yeah.
my squadron,
Yeah.
17th.
So you think the lack of training was because you were serving in the air unit?
The air car.
No, I think it was simply that there was no money for the military. You couldn't get re-elected to office, and that was your primary goal. Once you got elected, you were, as it is today, now campaigning to be re-elected. You didn't want to give up that office. When you couldn't get elected or re-elected by promising to strengthen the military to protect this country, all the people wanted to hear was some socialist use of the money, social planning, because they were desperate. There were no support basis of federal government, such as Social Security. So people just slowly starved and died in obscurity in the back roads. It was a terrible, tragical situation in this country. Vermont, for instance, had no interstate, so to get to the farms that were there, it took many, many hours of travel to go short distances. So the suicide rate in Vermont, that beautiful, bucolic state that everyone in the world loves to visit to see the leaves, you had about the highest suicide rate in the world there per capita because of the isolation. Remember, our interstate highway system did not come about until President Eisenhower.
I guess Eisenhower, when he was in the Army, took the trip from Frederick, Maryland, all the way to the West Coast to see kind of our lines of communication, and it took so many days that was
it.
militarily highly problematic.
Yep. But then when he was in Germany, after Germany had surrendered, he was so impressed with the Autobahn system. Yeah. Next question. Where are we?
They were still untrained in the Philippines.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I guess for me what's fascinating is kind of the strategic debates that were going on in Washington as they were considering what threat Japan posed. And all along, I mean, generally the view was to avoid a war with Japan. They didn't want a war with Japan, but they were concerned about the Philippines.
In a minor way.
Right, but the talk about protecting the Philippines really begins to emerge by the time we were sent there. And
That's
so,
right.
And so, it's interesting the gap between this kind of this strategic discourse that was happening in Washington and what was really on the ground. That there wasn't a concerted effort to protect the Philippines on the
No,
ground.
no
although-
one gave a damn about the Philippines.
Yeah.
They didn't even know the connection. As
Yeah,
it was
w-
more
right.
or
Well,
less.
well, yeah. Well,
yeah.
well, that's the thing is that what was the interest that the United States had in the Philippines, but the United States did fight a bloody war in the beginning of the 19th century, I mean, 20th century, to prevent the independence of the Philippines. So we had some interest there, but yeah,
Well,
yeah,
that was after the Spaniards
Right,
were
right,
thrown out.
right.
Yeah.
But well, I guess that's the thing is that what really did the United States see as its interest?
That was a
Right.
terrible disgrace at that time because we conquered the colonists' dictatorship of Spain towards the people of the Philippines, and we got rid of them. So now the Filipino people thought they were free, and the American government decided, no, you're not free yet, not till we tell you you are. So it was projected then to postpone the independence for the Philippines until 1946. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that history still reverberates in the current
Right.
It's banging around. It's coming back to haunt us every day.
And when they threw us out of those bases, I said, just retribution.
Durante would like this guy.
Coming from a former veteran in the Philippines, it's,
Yeah.
Well, explain.
Question from the end, someone?
So when did you start
Oh.
to get trained?
Oh, our massive training program started when they got antsy in about August.
August, they got announced in
Roughly.
August.
Yeah, we had an old timer from World War One in our squadron who was an infantry ground pounder in World War One, and he was a drunk, of course. Nearly everyone that went to the Philippines who stayed in the service were drunks, including all the officer corps.
That's true.
And they would get rid of the officers who were an annoyance and an embarrassment by sending them to the Philippines. General Wainwright, Skinny Wainwright, who everyone loved, was a true alcoholic, and he always had a good supply of booze, even the darkest days of Bataan. I don't know where the hell he found it, but he had it. He's the one that, when the war was over, he had a parade in Hartford, Connecticut, and he was quoted as, to the Japanese, now don't take offense, he was quoted as saying, they're damn liars, always have been, always will be. That's in the Daily News records.
He went to
So,
hell.
You had this.
where are we now?
You're
Oh,
senior
this.
guy.
So this fellow was given the job of teaching us to be soldiers, to march us up and down, and showed us how to clean the rifle and insert this 5 clips, 5 cartridges, and you had to load each one with a
Was
bolt
that the
action.
Springfield rifle?
Mm-hmm.
World
And it
War
was
One.
1903
Right.
design. So it was a really modern weapon. That was our super weapons that we were armed with. And he finally taught us how to load it, how to shoot it. But we couldn't shoot it because we didn't have any money for ammunition, so they didn't allow us to ever really test fire it. So never had any target practice. It's ludicrous to think how it was. Yeah. But I'm wondering today, relatively speaking, with these ultra-modern weapons, if much has changed.
Absolutely.
They let them fire it.
In many ways, it's changed, but
Yeah, well, so much of warfare now could be just in some room where you're looking at
yeah.
screens, and then you make a lot of lethal kinetic.
It'll come to robots doing all the fighting, I'm sure. Yeah.
But in
If
terms
there
of
is
the
any
funding,
fighting.
I mean, it's just
Yeah.
night and day. How much?
Yeah, right. Well, World War II transformed the American state into what some people call the national security state. I mean, the
Yeah.
amount of institutional innovation is just tremendous, and the allocation. So despite all the budget cuts, there's defense is in a sense sacred.
But unfortunately, the mechanisms that are purchased by the modern military are so damned expensive, they can only still buy a few units
Right.
at a time. Even if they develop a fabulous new military aircraft, when it comes time for the actual go-ahead by
Right.
Congress, okay, you could finally, after months and months or years of negotiation, they'll say, well, you can buy 12. So the order for 12 is placed with the manufacturer, and the price, because as a result of the minimal amount numbers being made, this price has skyrocketed. So it eats up a huge chunk of the budget, which shouldn't be.
Right.
So you can't buy the numbers, and yet you have the whole world practically where they're going to be necessary. And it doesn't change, it just gets worse, as it seems.
Yeah.
The more modern, the more creative. And I'm sure the Chinese and the Japanese are well abreast of all the secrets of the weaponry today. There are no secrets, really.
Yeah. Well, to some extent, but a lot of the stuff is kind of black box. So to some extent, you could do the kind of reverse engineering.
Yes.
But
Or theft or sex, one way or another.
So they started training you in August, and more planes started coming in, and more troops started coming in, and then December 7th.
Did we get there?
I don't know.
but between August and December 7th, I just would like to know to what extent there was a real kind of anticipation that something might happen, or
Well, General MacArthur got really stirred up, and he was bombarding Washington with demand telegrams for more equipment, and they were turning him down, of course. But he never stopped his appeal, because he suddenly dawned on him that they might, even though he wasn't ready for it, that it might happen by mistake. And when the Japanese struck in the Philippines, which was about 18 hours after Pearl Harbor, he was so shocked, he had panicked totally in his office in the walled city of Manila. And he couldn't react. He couldn't give an order or approve an order.
so even though he was worried about it, he was
Yeah.
shocked that it actually happened.
Well, he said they dared attack me before I was ready. He really felt that way.
How dare they?
But
How
did you,
dare they?
in those several months leading up to December, did you feel the anticipation that things were changing?
Oh,
rapidly?
yes. Oh,
Yes,
yes.
you did.
Yeah. We were trained, I say we, I didn't actually physically do it myself. We were trained by a fellow in my organization, General Fellows, who was a genius, I guess, in engineering and aviation engineering. And he trained a team to put together these aircraft that were coming in pieces. So we had to assemble our own aircraft. And we had maneuvers, air maneuvers, on Luzon, about halfway up the west coast, at a place called Iba in the Zambales mountain range country on the China Sea. It was a little airstrip there. And we went there in October, the 17th Pursuit, my organization, and the pilots trained taking off and landing there. They actually were issued the rights to burn some aviation fuel. And when the Japanese struck, they caught them in a landing pattern. The squadron that had replaced us, they were coming in to make their landings to refuel, and they were caught in midair, too low to react,
Right.
and they were wiped out. It was a sad thing. And Nichols Field, of course, was plumb, plumb. And Clark Field, they caught the bombers on the ground, the what were they?
17.
B-17s, yeah. MacArthur could not approve moving them and having a proper defensive perimeter established to protect the aircraft and the structures on the field at Clark Field. That's where the volcano buried it
Right.
with
Oh,
the
right, the
debris.
Clark.
Yeah.
He couldn't get permission to do that? Is that what you're saying?
He couldn't approve any
Oh, he did-
requests.
Oh, he couldn't, or he did.
He panicked. He couldn't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So before the attack, what was the reputation of Douglas MacArthur among the troops?
Before the attack, we really didn't have any. We down here at the
Alright.
bottom of the hierarchy didn't really have any comprehension of this guy. His
He was a
headquarters.
sole
Oh yeah, he was a
the emperor.
emperor, right? Without clothes. So, yeah. Where were we there?
Yes, MacArthur panicked.
Oh,
MacArthur's
oh,
panicking. Then what happened?
the general in charge of the Air Corps in the Philippines, who brought in the B-17s just before the war broke out for us. And they were lined up beautifully, wingtip to wingtip. And when the Pearl Harbor was attacked, he wanted to immediately hit the targets on Formosa, which is Taiwan
Right.
today. And he couldn't get an approval from MacArthur. And here are these generals and colonels begging him for permission to launch the counterstrike because they knew where every one of these airfields were on Formosa, Taiwan. But there was no order from the general. And without him giving the approval, they couldn't do it. So when he finally awakened from this stupor, I guess you'd call it, and gave the order, okay, it was too late. The bombs were falling. And a lot of fellows died because of it. It wiped out nearly everything on Clark Field again. The Japanese took control of the air of the Philippines so fast. It was unbelievable. But they were so skilled, they had been trained over and over and over.
Planning this thing.
Yeah, yeah. Their gunners and their navy were so good in the use of even night maneuvers, firing the big guns at night. They were super accurate with their fire. Super trained versus no training. So,
Yeah, well, this is really, interesting because I mean, being a child of kind of people who lived in World War II, like my mother, and living through the occupation period, MacArthur's, is like the great man. And,
Oh, yeah.
And even as I was growing
well, he
up,
was the god of
yeah,
Japan.
right. And
Yeah.
then even in the United States, as I was growing up, the mythology about MacArthur. But then it's only after I went to graduate school I became aware of this other side of MacArthur.
He was
But he
corrupt.
suddenly became the buffoon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Corrupt and lazy and a
Yes.
womanizer and who knows what else.
A mother's boy
And all sorts of, he
yeah.
took the
Yeah.
gold with
Yeah.
him when he
Yeah.
left Corregidor.
Yeah.
But he was a true genius in military tactics. Once
Once
he got the thing rolling.
Out of the stupid.
It took time to get rolling, but he was ready. And he still didn't have much to fight with. When they pulled him out of the Philippines and he arrived in Australia, he expected to see a massive army there, an air force, ready for him to take command to roll back. And there was nothing. There was a handful of aircraft.
And also, people should know, starting in August, September, October, there were tank battalions being sent over to the Philippines. But these tank battalions had been just pulled together, and they were training with sticks
And
instead
the
of rifles.
tankers were operating cracker boxes.
Right.
I think a 30 caliber rifle would actually penetrate it.
Yeah, they were,
And they were called tanks.
and they had trained with sticks, and they barely were doing maneuvers, and most of them actually arrived in November,
Right.
off the boat, and a week later they arrived Thanksgiving Day, and a week later, guess what? So that's because I work also with some POWs who were tankers. Okay, then Nichols Field is gone. What happens?
Nichols Field is gone.
Yes.
Clark Field is gone.
It's all gone.
Eva's gone. So we then were transported to a place called Bataan. Is everyone familiar with Bataan? If you're not, make yourself familiar with it. Google it. Bataan.
That actually is the last battle.
Yeah.
That was the liberation of the Philippines.
Yes.
Right. It's where all the red is.
So we were proceeding to
That's
Bataan
better.
That's better.
to defend
Where
it,
the I in Manila
and
is.
we thought we were on our way to Australia, to freedom.
Where the I is.
In the word Manila.
Yeah, that's the peninsula.
Right there.
Well, you see
Bataan.
the stars where Manila was, and Nichols Field is now the international airport in Manila. So it's a little ways away. Okay, so you got there and you realized.
Most Americans, even today, children who should have been taught more in school, when they hear the word Bataan, they say, "Oh, Batman!" That's how familiar they are with it.
Yeah.
Batman. So we think we're coming to
Australia.
Australia, where we'll be safe. Instead of that, we're at this strange place called Marvelis, the tip of that Bataan Peninsula. And we march up the dusty road to we knew not where. And it was Christmas Day, approximately, as I recall. And I remember eating a can of tomatoes and sharing it with 3 or 4 other fellows, a large can. But that was it. And then we kept going, and finally there's a spot with our sign, 17th Pursuit, a spot in the jungle, which was our territory. So we made a Boy Scout camp there. That was about it. And we were then put to work cleaning out 100 Japanese who had landed on the West Coast. Have you heard that story? No. Well, we marched single file down the jungle towards the coast, the rocky beach. And we were talking away, jabbering at the top of our lungs, and totally oblivious to the dangers that were ahead.
At this point, you still hadn't fired a rifle.
We haven't fired a rifle yet. The headman, the point man, arrives at the waterline, and then things open up. They're firing at us from all sides, and we can't even see them.
You didn't know they were there.
No, we thought there were about 100. We were told to go in and clean out.
Clean them
They had landed the day before. This is our intelligence.
You can laugh about it now.
Yeah. These Japanese soldiers had tied themselves in the palm trees, hidden in the fronds, and they're firing down from the tops of the trees and from all sides. We used discretion instead of valor, and we turned and got the hell out of there.
I
And
should
we
have asked
moved
my
fast.
uncle if he was on one of those trees.
There you are.
How fast did the guys run?
Yeah. But that was
So they
a
ran.
favorite stunt, you know, tying themselves in the tree, hidden in the foliage. Those guys were tremendous soldiers. And they were so self-sufficient, they carried their own supply of dried food and could live independently with no organization. Yeah. And it turned out, instead of 100 Japanese had landed, there were 5,000. That was the estimate, the total. And the Philippine scouts were sent to help us finish the job. They still thought there were about 100. And we had a perimeter, U-shape, and the scouts came along, and as they walked by us, they would say, "Okay, Joe, we'll take care of them." They were fantastic guys. And unfortunately, the Japanese died, all of them, with very few exceptions. The scouts cleaned them right out. And the Japanese were top infantrymen, but they were no match for those Philippine scouts. They were the most fantastic soldiers on the planet, I think.
So what do you think enabled the Filipino scouts to wipe out these Japanese soldiers? You call them tremendous soldiers. Is it because they knew the terrain better?
They had the
better training? Or?
intestinal fortitude and the training.
Mhm.
They had been trained by some good American trainers for a long time, probably 2 or 3 generations from the Spanish-American War days, when they were invited to form the organizations. I forget exactly how these were formulated, original scouts, but they were superbly trained, and they were fed a much different diet than the ordinary Filipinos. So they were much stronger and larger, muscularly speaking. And they knew how to handle their weapons, I assure you.
They were special forces.
Yeah,
Basically.
they were special. They had the artillery, and they fired 155s, they called them,
Yeah.
155. And they had their Air Force, which were these open cockpit I think they were 1931 created first low-wing aircraft for the Army Air Corps, and we gave them to the Filipinos. And one Filipino, Jesse Villamore, renowned as a hero of World War II by the Filipino people, he would actually go up in his little pea shooter, open cockpit. It was called the P-26. Boeing manufactured it, 230 calibers, and he would dive on entire squadrons of Japanese Zeros. And it was like a bee or a fly to them. This annoying fellow coming through their maneuvers there. Air defense, it was crazy, but he did it. I guess he did it repeatedly. Villamore, Google him. Jesse Villamore. So, where are we? We're fighting on Bataan, defending against landing after landing. The Japanese kept trying to land behind the main line of defense. And between the scouts and the now American i.e. Air Corps infantrymen and sailors in white uniforms died with coffee. Japanese thought they were suicide troops when they saw this strange color in their uniforms. We held off repeated attempts to land, and we slowly starved. Day by day, it got worse and worse, and we were riddled with malaria, dengue fever, dysentery, and our weight loss averaged about 45% of our normal weight. So at this point, the next step would have been total slaughter of everyone on Bataan. So General Edward King of Georgia decided, after consulting with Washington, that he had to save as many as he could. So he met the Japanese, discussed, and he was trying to get terms, but he couldn't get any. But he still decided he wanted to save as many as he could. It probably would have been 2 days at the latest, more, and we all would have been gone. But he did it. He surrendered in the name of the United States of America. Largest command surrendered to an enemy, I believe, in history. So, those of us who refused to surrender, and there were a few hundred of us, made it across the water of Manila Bay to the island of Corregidor, which was dotted right in the entrance to the harbor here. Right about here?
No, a little further in.
Yeah, right about there.
No, in the water, the blue part.
Oh, pardon me. What?
You see Manila where the star is?
Where are we?
Probably in where the, somewhere.
Oh,
in the
yeah,
Somewhere
yeah,
in there.
yeah, right
Somewhere
in here.
in the
Yeah,
A.
right there. Yep. It was so close enough so you could see it clearly. The island of Corregidor, which was a fortified island by the Spanish in the 1898 Spanish-American War. Corregidor. Supposedly impregnable. The defense guns were in the open, the big guns, and they had some mighty big guns, but they were sitting targets for modern artillery. So,
You
Yeah.
said the American troops lost a lot of weight. Is it because bad logistics, lack of food, or is it
lack of food, simple.
Yeah,
Lack of planning, lack of food. But Pearl Harbor had a lot to do with it. The Navy couldn't bring reinforcements to the Philippines because there was no more Navy. It was all sunk, or most of it. What we had left after Pearl Harbor was so small in numbers and firepower that it would have been suicidal if they tried to break through, even though they promised they were coming. They sent us a lot of promises.
So when this nonsense, so the men who were surrendered on Bataan were sick, they were starving, they were dispirited, they were exhausted. And then you bring them all down to Marvillas to start the Bataan march. Yeah, and then they're afraid, and then you have bayonets, and you have nervous Japanese soldiers who stab or kill at will. It was not pretty. Like there's just some woman wrote an article that she walked the path of the 60 miles. Well, she didn't have a bayonet in her neck, and she was well fed.
Yeah, it was one of the most ridiculous
It's insane.
piece of things.
She had a hat too.
Yeah, that appeared in the Bunkei Shinju.
Shinju,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's just one of the most
Okay,
asinine.
but you didn't do the march. You swam
I
over.
did a march, but a different march.
Right, but not
We
that
were-
march.
We held out on Corregidor for another 30 days.
He fought with the Marines at this point. On Bataan, he
Yeah.
was Army, infantry.
And my Marine company was a couple of hundred men in holes dug, scooped out of the beach, the rocks. And we had World War I water-cooled machine gun for beach defense. Mighty defense. And again, the shells came in like rain. The analogy, the rain, hail. They were pouring in on us. The bombs were falling from the air, and between the aerial bombs and the shells coming in by land from two sides, it was as if the whole thing was on fire. And these guns that they were firing at us, 240 millimeter, 9.4 inch, was a massive shell. And I can't tell you how many they had cannon, but of that caliber, but they had a lot. And that was why the urgency of the so-called death march was so brutal. They were rushing in their cannons to destroy Corregidor. And as they're coming in, the surrendered Americans on Bataan are going out. So when the twain met on the road, it was misery, to say the least. But anyway, they had this, the men on Bataan had this horrible experience of this long walk without food or water, or some got food, some got water, and some even rode in trucks, but the majority walked. And they were in no condition to walk, of course, so when they fell, they were dead. And they finally got to a place that was wound up being called Camp O'Donnell. That was one of the worst pest holes that were run by the Japanese. The dead were lying all over the ground. Flies on their eyes would be about an inch thick. On their mouth, their ears, any orifice was covered with a blanket of flies, and their life juices were flowing out their rear end. They were burning up with fever. So if you can picture this human being who had formerly been a young, healthy American soldier not too long before, and now he's a skeleton lying on the ground with the skin just barely stretched over, and the organs, there was no fat left. And as the life juices, as I put it, are pouring out of his rear end, it's probably one of the most horrible things that could happen in warfare. So that toll daily was estimated at up to, at the peak, 500 or 600 at that location.
A day.
A day. And then there was another large camp called Kabata Tuan, which was at the railhead where all the food had been stored, which was captured by the Japanese, the food, the rice. That had been stored in warehouses there to keep Bataan going until the Navy could break through. But in reality, the Japanese got the food, and we didn't get anything. So now the men on Corregidor that I was with are being blasted from the air and by sea. And again, they got attacked ashore, and General Wainwright was terrified that when that tanker reached the entrance to the main tunnel, which was quite exposed, and it was used as the command headquarters and the hospital. And if the tank managed to get there and shoot into the tunnel, that would have meant death of a large number of people. And Wainwright decided it was hopeless again. So he requested permission, and he did it. Shut down Corregidor and abandoned it to the Japanese, total surrender. But one happening at that point that almost no one seems to know about was all these people on Kraganor, about 12,000, were penned into an area of a couple of acres, concrete, which was the supply depot called the Truck Garage, 92nd Truck Garage. It was the maintenance area for the whole island, where and the trucks from there would deliver and distribute all the supplies all over the island. So here's 12,000 men, I don't think there were any women, packed into this couple of acres of concrete. No sanitation, of course. 1/2-inch water pipe, and that was on the surface of the ground. And what else? Oh,
It kept you there for about 10 days.
yeah, but we dug finally slit trenches for sanitary purposes, and
Because
some,
there was waste all over the area.
the whole ground was covered with human waste, the whole acreage. But men would go to the slit trench to squat down, and they would slide off backwards and drop into that liquid, and there was no way of saving them. They drowned in there, foul waste in large numbers. If you wanted to get semi-clean, you had one side open, which was Manila Bay. There were no machine guns there. The machine guns were in a circle around the camp, the garage area. If you went in the water of Manila Bay, you had to push away this stuff on the surface to make way for a little clean water, semi-clean. From there, we were brought to Manila, to the water's edge of the main highway that runs along there still today, which is called Dewey Boulevard after Admiral Dewey, who sank the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay. So we got there, the water was up to our necks. We were ordered over the side and up to the road, and there Japanese officers on horseback with drawn swords got on all sides of us and marched us down the road, and the sidewalks were packed with Filipinos. They'd been ordered at Bayonet Point to turn out there to see the crushed American. His day was gone now in the Far East, and the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere would take over from now on. But they didn't cheer as they were told to. They cried, and they tried to give us food and water, and some gave their lives in the attempt. Loads were beaten to a pulp for trying. And we did a lot of marching through the city, finally to a railhead where we were packed into these metal mining, metal freight cars, which were similar to that type of car used in France, the 40 and 8.
They were French rail cars, and they were
Yeah,
used
the
for
40 men
sugar
or 8
cane.
horses.
Exactly, Holocaust cars.
Yeah. Were they from France?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was the similarity. So the thing was just packed with probably, 2 or 3 times the number that could normally hold. And you couldn't sit down, lie down, or fall down. You were just packed together, flesh to flesh. And your life juices were flowing out of you, and you were urinating in place and defecating, and the floor got coated with it inches deep. And then we had this long rail journey to a point that wasn't too far from this enormous camp called Camp Cabanatuan 1. And that was the place that we stayed until we went out on special work details in different locations in the islands, Philippine Islands. From there, I was sent to Palawan. You saw it on the map. We built an airfield out of jungle with our bare hands, picks, shovels, saws, axes, no trucks, no earth moving equipment. We had to cut all the vegetation down, level it by hand, and then dig coral rock and haul it from farther and farther distances. I suppose at the longest it might have been a couple of miles in these ancient mining cars in V shape that you've seen pictures of in deep in mines. So it took about 6 men to push a fully loaded car, barefoot, sharp coral you're working on, no clothes, loincloth wrapped around you, your personal parts. That was about it. And the sun was so intense because it was just north of the equator. And you were burned black. Hair would be hanging down over your shoulders, beard down to your waist. We were quite a sight. So when we finally got the coral tamped down for, I think, about 3,000 feet runway, we then had to unload cement from the cements, loose cement came in the holes of freighters that they had. And I fortunately was given that detail. I don't know how I got these beautiful details, but where you are was another fellow on the other side of the net, heavy rope net. And we would toss bags of cement, powdered cement, into the net until we got it loaded. Then they'd haul it up on deck with a winch, transport it to a truck, and it went off to the airfield construction. I got from doing the emptying the hold routine to mixing the cement. You had to area about from here to the camera, sheets of metal, and or about 2/3 the way, and you'd have several on each side of it, mixing it all by hand. If you've ever seen highway construction where they have the block off of the area to be paved, we did it by hand. So it hardened finally. We now had a fully operable airfield. And the first plane to take off was the Japanese commander. And he had us line the edge of the airfield as he opened cockpit, and he's saluting. And the tailskin is ripping a strip out of the concrete because we had overloaded with, in the mix, little subterfuge there, sabotage. Rip! Well, they didn't know what was going on. And he thought we were all his men idolizing him and saying a farewell.
Right.
And we're mumbling under our breath, of course, and they, you son of a bitch, thank God you're gone. Captain Kishimoto. I can't remember his first name.
That's amazing.
So
Remember
what
his
did he
last
call
you
name.
what did he
meant-
call
yeah,
you?
Kish-
They lined you up every day, and what did he call you guys?
Oh, he would get up on the stump, as in the movies,
Yeah.
and he would bellow out, "My honorable warriors, you must work hard today, and you will soon be going home to your families. You will save your money." You can imagine the murmuring of the lineup. This is every morning. He sent us off with this message. "My honorable warriors." I wish I had a recording of
Did
it.
you do exercises, company exercises?
Not as I recall, no. That's more modern, I think.
What does
Yeah.
what does it mean to save up money?
He actually believed we were working for him
Okay.
for the greater glory of Dai Nippon.
Right. So, but you were not paid.
Oh, God, no. But you got a piece of paper, a script, 50 cent.
Oh, so you
Oh, it's a
did.
military script.
Yeah.
So they did give you
But you
quote-
couldn't buy anything with it. It was
It's
just.
useless.
But they did quote pay you.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
I didn't realize that. So what did you
I
do
had
with
a
it?
50-cent note home somewhere.
But what did you guys do with all your script?
I thought, do you really want to know?
Oh, I okay.
It's probably the only thing you had to.
Right. Rather crude, of course. Rough.
Oh God.
Oh yeah.
So
So,
would they pay you once a week or what?
oh, I don't know. We didn't call it.
It was
pay.
just ceremonial,
It was
right?
a ceremonial
Once
thing.
in a while, they
Yeah,
just did it
piece
for.
of paper. Yeah. It's. I know it said 50 cent because I kept
So,
one
yes,
Right.
when I got
SCN,
home.
yeah.
half a yen.
Yeah.
But there were no stores
Oh,
around
no.
for you to buy
No.
anything.
Oh, God, no. All the. You were so totally exhausted at the end of your shift, if you want to call it that, you would just collapse. That was all through the whole affair of slave labor, no matter where you were. You just were totally worn down, ground down with exhaustion, because if you didn't keep a fevered pace of work up, the guards had permission to beat you to death if you didn't cooperate with Shigono properly.
So I think there are records that these guys
Yeah.
were paid, and I think a lot of the money went into the National Bank, and there are records. But so we kind of know somewhere how much they got paid, but no one ever saw any money.
And it didn't happen too often. It wasn't a weekly or.
Oh my God, no.
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 Yeah, in Hong Kong, there were lawsuits by those people who have a military script
Yeah.
issued during the war, but they
Really?
didn't get anywhere.
No, they tried.
They tried.
Yeah. What's that? What was that huge prison camp you went near there? Did you?
Mukden?
No, in
Where?
oh,
What?
the Dutch, Indonesia.
Indonesia,
Yeah, what was the main city there?
Jakarta.
No, not Jakarta.
Bandung, which was
Changi.
but
Changi with the
Changi is
large
Singapore.
Changi. That's Singapore.
Oh, Singapore.
Yeah, but that was near Changi, or Changi was in Singapore.
Yes.
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 Okay. Yeah, I knew a doctor. What was he from? I told you about him.
He was a child in Indonesia.
Right.
He was Dutch.
Yes.
And he was a kid imprisoned in Indonesia during the war.
That's different.
But he was Indian. I'm talking about the Indian doctor
Oh.
from India. You met him.
Oh, his father.
His wife's father.
Right, his wife's father.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know where he was. She was.
I know a fellow in Simsbury, Connecticut, who was a prisoner at age 2 in Indonesia. The Nederland, Oost-Indie. Is that how you pronounce it? Nederland, Oost?
It's Dutch, so
Yeah.
Dutch East Indies.
He was 2 years old. He became a professor of dentistry at UConn, University of Connecticut. So where were we?
Well, can you give us an impression of this guy Kishimoto, and then any of the other Japanese? Because one of the, I'm just interested in kind of what war and these systems do to kind of human beings.
Well, he was really truly a caricature of himself.
Especially to a 19-year-old.
Tell
Yeah.
them how you used to try to get out of work and bide yourself some time by getting out of work. With the cards.
Oh, we'd sit around the circle
Yeah. And
when
make
we'd
friends
have
with
a
the guards.
yasme. You know
Yeah,
the word
right.
yasme.
Yasumi.
And
Yasumi.
the guards wanted to smoke, so they'd yell yasme, yasme, and we'd get in the circle around the guard, and he'd pull out his cigarettes, and he'd start sucking on that cigarette, slobbering over it. And when he got it well wetted and slobbered, he would throw it in the center of the circle to watch the Americans fight over it. Yeah, that's pretty low. You can't sing too much lower than that. But that's how much you craved tobacco. Yeah,
Some of the guys.
some. Yeah.
Also, how would you get out of work and talking about the sugar?
Oh, the Sato.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear? You know Sato? Sato. Sugar.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, we
But he was
devised ways of using psychology to get out of as much work as possible. So you would engage the guard in conversation and using pidgin, a lot of hand movements and so on. And you paint a word picture of this enormous warehouse filled with bags of sugar and how wonderful sugar was. Sato Joto, you'd say. Joto, Sato. And he'd say, oh, 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 Sato Joto, oh. And you'd say, me, Tamadachi, I'm your friend. When the war's over, I will give you, my family owns this big sugar warehouse. You are my Tamadachi, so I will give you a bag of this sugar. Oh! And you'd get him going enough so he'd forget all about going back to work. So if you gained another 5 minutes or 10 minutes, that was a victory. Yeah. But the cigarette in the center, yeah. If you could picture that, yeah. A lot of scenes for a great film if
Yeah.
it was done right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't found anyone to make it. I offered it to, what was his name?
Spielberg.
Steven Spielberg. I wrote out a rough script, mailed it to him in Long Island, where he had a house, and they sent it back unopened.
Well, I've got a nephew who wants to become a film director. He's a senior in high school, but he's very ambitious and he's trying to get to the top cinema schools.
There was Unbroken.
Yeah,
but
Unbroken.
That didn't
Yeah.
do a good job of it.
Yeah. You read Unbroken?
Yeah.
You read Unbroken?
I saw the film.
Did everyone read Unbroken yet? Be sure and read it. Lieutenant Phil, his buddy,
Yeah.
Pilot.
one was the pilot, one was the navigator, and Phil was transferred to my Coppermine camp. That was his last location. I didn't know him personally, but he wound up there. It's a great book.
But see, you eventually got out of Palawan before the massacre.
I got out. I was a lucky bastard.
The Badly Master.
It was a miracle that you lived, so it was pure luck. There are men who tell the stories how they had their religion, their Bible, that's all bullshit. Yeah.
That's luck.
Anyway, I worked on the medical officer who actually was permitted to hold sick call. So you repeatedly go to his sick call, and the best salesman would get out of work. Well, I tried to be the best salesman.
You should know that he went on to be one of the best salesmen for Northwest Mutual Life.
Yeah, I was reading that. I can see it. It doesn't surprise
He
me
was
at
in
all.
so he was in training.
Yes, yes.
That's where you got your training.
My father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my father.
So you went daily though to Mr. Dr.
Yeah,
Mango.
Dr. Mungo. Never forget him. And he finally put me on the list as unfit for labor. Of course, all of us were unfit for labor. But I don't know how I convinced him, but I did. So I went out with a bunch of fellows who had gone the ultimate route of getting out of manual labor in the prison camp, and that was to have their arms shattered by an iron bar. A fellow from Long Island, Jerry something or other, I called him Jerry the Executioner. He found this iron bar near the Benjo, behind the barracks. We had to go down these steep stairs to go to the Benjo, and it was concrete floor. And you had to get permission to go to the Benjo as you got to the head of the stairs. And Jerry would lurk inside the Benjo with his iron bar if he had made a contract with you. And you then would pay him 10 cents, 10 cigarettes to break your arm. And you would put your arm on the stump, and he would come down on it with this iron bar that he found and shatter your arm. Well, that would get you out of work. So Kishimoto, after a while, was getting very upset by all these men who said, "We fell in the Benjo." So he made a speech. "You must stop falling in Benjo." That was an order. Yeah.
Amazing.
So you're on the boat out of,
Oh, going out of Palawan, I was telling the rest of the fellows on the boat who had their arms shattered how I had simply convinced Dr. Mungo. And, a Japanese officer was on the boat with us, and he heard me. And he turned to me and he said, "Very clever, Mr. Crowley." I said, "Oh, shit, I'm doomed." I thought they'd turn the boat right around and bring me back. But he didn't. He went to college in California, he told me.
Oh.
Yeah. Turned out to be a nice guy. Hated this Japanese military. So we got back to Cabanatuan. I got back. And then, zoom, they were down to the dregs, packing the hell ships to send more bodies to Japan to be slaves. So I went out on one of the last ones before they were all being sunk. I was again lucky, very lucky. Mine made it through. You've read about others. A total of about 7,000 Americans went down in those ships. When the torpedoes would crash into the whole hole would collapse. And here they are with steel or iron, whatever it was made out of, collapsing superstructure of the ship, crashing down on them as it's sinking. In the pitch black darkness, what a horrible thing that must have been. Yeah. Remember, on those slave ships, they would drop a bucket with this, sometimes rice, sometimes whatever grains they had a surplus of or no one else wanted, and they drop a bucket of this cooked mess down in the middle of this pack of starving human beings in the pitch blackness. And then they drop buckets to haul out the human waste. Of course, that would tip sometimes, you know. You can imagine that was like. So I made it back to Japan, or to Japan, I should say. And my first protocol was Hitachi on the East Coast.
Oh,
Worked in that compromise.
Make the next
Yeah.
slide. The prison
Can you
camp.
just push
Hitachi.
like the next?
It's on the map.
Yes.
No,
Oh,
not that one.
more.
Yeah.
There.
That's the giant company, Hitachi.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Right there.
Right here.
And he was at Hitachi. I forget the numbers. This is what.
Number 7.
or eight.
You're at 7?
Yeah.
No, you're at 8.
I was?
Yes.
Okay. God, she knows more about me than I know about myself.
Good memory.
She really was there with me.
Right.
Yeah, I was
Oh, yeah.
there.
In another life.
Right.
Right, Mindy?
Another
Yeah.
life.
Another
That
life.
may explain a lot.
Yeah. Sendai was the location of huge number of American prisoners.
Right.
Yeah. So all the large companies used us as slaves. They all did. Even though today it's hard for Mindy to get them to admit it. Yeah.
And then you were at Furukawa.
Then I went off to Furukawa,
In
Ashio mine.
Which is there too.
Is Ashio on there also?
Yes.
I thought it's on.
Yeah.
Close. Near
Right
Nagano.
here.
Right there.
Between the T and
Oh
O.
yeah, yeah,
In
yeah.
the mountains.
Yep.
Tochigi Ken.
That's where the Winter Olympics were held near
Near
in the,
Nagano.
Nagano. I think it's all resort country, except for downtown Ashio. We found it to be probably in almost as bad condition as when I was there. It was a pretty miserable place. The Japanese government was finally forced to shut that mine down, the people's pressure on them. 1974, I think it was. Because it had poisoned the landscape for, I don't know, 100 square miles? Something
This is
like
a
that.
long history of copper.
Horrible place. And I think they all had to go in the dole when they were thrown out of work. So the federal government in Japan was paying out payments to all the people who were thrown out of work because they shut the mine. And the Japanese government was kind of ashamed that anyone would know this. So when Kelly and I were there, what was it like, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think originally they tried maybe not to have you visit.
Oh, they
there,
pretended there was no such place.
But eventually,
yeah.
with advocation from
Yeah.
a few,
People who knew, who had been there.
yeah,
That nice young lady we had
Yes.
on the tour.
yeah,
Yes.
we had two really
Yeah.
good Japanese ladies who advocated and got you to go.
Yeah.
Yuka. Was it Yuka?
Yeah,
You,
Yeah.
Yuka,
yeah.
and then, but
There's
then
an
the
there's an
journalists-
advocacy group in Japan of people who like to research in the POW history, and they're very very knowledgeable, and have done research and pictures and all sorts of things, and
Mm.
they
Fuyuko.
pester the foreign ministry to do the right thing, but it's pulling teeth. No, they
Fuyuko did it too.
yeah,
Mm. But can you imagine now,
right.
first they told us there was no such place.
How could they say that?
Yeah. And then,
And then they said, "Oh well, yeah, there's a little bit of something there, but
yeah, but
it's
nothing
too."
worthwhile going
Yeah.
to see.
And then they said, "No, it's too difficult to get there."
Yeah. Oh yeah, all kinds of excuses.
But Fuyuko pushed for it too, and then
I don't know what the hell they were afraid of, do you?
no, I mean there was a museum. It was very interesting. You were very glad to go back and see it.
Sure. I think the point that the Japanese government had to pay these people as the dole, as they call it in England, you know, the
Well,
supported
there was
by
a big industrial problem there with people getting the pollution case is very famous,
yeah,
and people got really sick, and that they didn't mention that there were POWs or Allied POWs there. You know, the history is ugly.
yep,
Oh, there are fish dying. Oh, look at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, the English Wikipedia doesn't mention POW labor.
Well, it means I haven't gotten to it yet. That's going to be another project.
This is,
ah,
I don't think the Japanese one does either.
But yeah, we did see some housing that looked quite depressed. Maybe that's
It's
why,
it's a depressed area.
oh, it's
yes.
terrible slum.
and maybe that's why they didn't want us
Country.
originally to go. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
They
usually
weren't proud
first,
of it,
first
that's
thing,
for
it's
sure.
not the question that's proud. It's just like they're too lazy. Like any bureaucrat around the world, just like it's going to take work.
Yeah, that's
To
right.
arrange
It
the
took a little
trip.
bit of
Right,
work.
right, and
Yeah.
I think for what end, you know, I mean,
Yeah,
it
what am I
doesn't-
getting from
you
it?
know, right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's going to take work. It's not on the schedule. It's like. So the first answer, a bureaucrat anywhere in the world, no.
No.
No,
Oh,
Yeah.
it's not
no, we
there.
can't do that. There's no such thing.
Right.
So it does say that in 1944
Yeah.
it became designated as a military supply company.
Uh-huh.
So maybe that's
To
all.
Furukawa?
Ashio
Which
No,
was-
does it say military supply company?
to the government.
Just direct to the government.
Doesn't say direct or indirect, but it's here it says Furukawa. Yes.
Yeah.
So it belonged to Furukawa.
Yes, it still
And
does.
yet, even today, Mindy says they deny it.
It doesn't say they were POW labor.
We just have to go back. It's a good project for our students to correct the Wikipedia pages. Fill it out. I know it's getting late.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Oh, it's my God! It's past 2:30.
yeah, well, this was fascinating. I could sit
Well,
here,
that's the problem, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, yeah.
So
Does any of these remind? Oh, you've been
Oh,
here,
yeah.
so yeah.
Mm-hmm.
does this look all familiar?
Yeah, riding into the mine car right there, the top
Mhm.
left. Yep, I was going in. Yep, and that we saw that too.
Hmm.
And the bridge down there.
Yep.
This
Yep,
one.
We walked over the bridge.
Yep. rode
And
over the
actually,
bridge.
if you go back to the page with the map, we can click to the page of the mine, and there'll be pictures of the mine during his era.
Okay.
Oh, when you were there, yeah.
It's what you don't see there that really counts.
Yeah.
The
Now
tunnels
go
about
to the
this high.
dot. Oh.
There
yeah,
were
okay,
American
go to Tokyo.
prisoners
Go to Tokyo.
who actually
look for Ashio,
volunteered
go
to
down.
run the drills,
Go to
the
8.
pneumatic drills, and the bits were as long as from here to the wall. The
There.
drill.
That's the Hitachi.
Pneumatic.
So what?
Pounding
no, that's
into their
Hitachi.
shoulders, they were crazy. As
You
I
gotta go to
recall, a
9.
couple of
9
these
feet.
guys were typical
Yeah, Furukawa, right
Texans.
underneath it. There.
Oh, so
You
they-
know,
Your
the southern
photos.
so
mentality.
they were macho.
Look, look.
Look at that. Any
Oh,
of it look
the
familiar?
picture.
No.
Oh, okay, that was your POW.
POW camp.
Where?
These.
Where it says POW.
PW.
This is upon
At
liberation.
Ashio.
Yeah.
Oh, right on the river, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, we marched over the bridge every morning.
Are there more pictures? It's further down.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to,
Okay.
not to.
You can,
Mm.
you can. I'll send you this by
Yeah,
online,
yeah.
so you can click the links.
Yeah, great.
Here we are. Who are these fellows?
You see it yourself there, by any chance?
He was on the cover of Life magazine.
He was.
Yeah.
Wow.
Boy, you should send
And
that to
Oh,
me.
yeah.
what year was that? You found it when you got home. You were going through. Somebody had a stack of old Life magazines. Not the cover. Sorry, you were in it.
In it.
In it.
Is it's you're not in that picture?
I don't know.
And it was their first battle going off to in Bataan.
Oh.
Oh, that
I want that.
that was
picture.
that first Battle of Bataan where 100 Japanese had
Exactly.
landed.
And it showed a truck, and it showed all these guys.
Give or take.
And I'm very clear
he's,
in it.
And he's very clear, right in the with his
I need that picture. Okay.
rifle.
Hmm.
Some Life magazine,
I
not the cover,
apologize, but I have.
inside.
Oh,
to go
it's
to
been
my
a
next-
pleasure.
Yeah,
You need to
thank you
send me
so
the
much. I learned
reference
so
to it.
much.
And
Oh,
then
I'm
this
telling the
thing, which I
professor.
gave you.
No,
Yes.
You'll
it's
notice
just,
there's
it's
lots
just,
the references like this one.
an amazing story.
I want to know the
Well,
date
if I keep
and
talking,
the,
I can't
and
drop
the
that.
newspaper this was from.
Yeah.
Well,
I
you
want
know,
you to go through and see if you can find.
uh,
You must have it
yeah, well,
somewhere.
quite seriously,
Some of them, but some of these I've never
I
seen
would love to
before.
see that,
Oh,
yeah.
that
Can
script.
you do that for me?
There was some things that he
and,
does. He's got
If
lots
you
of
could
clips
get
and
the
stuff.
money now,
Some
getting the money is the big
articles
deal.
and
well,
things
yeah,
are
of
written about
course.
him, But
Financing.
there are some in there I've never
How-
seen.
and-
You
and
have
are you
the
there?
fix,
Are you
the
there?
sets are
Look,
there.
look,
Most
look,
of them you don't
Are
have to
you
build
one
them.
of those? Do
Uh,
you remember this or?
Ashio, it was been.
no, this is a newer thing, I think.
No,
No.
this was, look at, POWs have been evacuated from Ashio camp.
Wow.
Do you recognize any of these guys?
Well, I can't see them very well.
Okay.
That's a blur. Or are these? You sure
You're
these-
probably the
Those are
most
your
handsome guy
readers.
there, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Those
He's
are the
busy
readers, not
talking money out
distance.
of the guard.
yeah. Can we get a copy of this?
It's online.
Thank
You
you
can
so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have the link in here. You can just then print it out when you get home.
Ah,
Oh, well, I got it.
sayonara.
No, no, mata.
I
He-
may
he-
be in there,
he does
but I
remember
just can't.
Extraordinary amount
That's
of
just a few.
Japanese, but
I mean,
it's
how
very
many
rough.
were you, a couple hundred? How many were in that camp, maybe?
Oh, I'd
It's-
say about 500 or 600.
The number is on the website, but
Okay.
Yeah, everything you need to know about that is on there. Do you look familiar? Does she look familiar?
This young lady,
Yeah.
she was an actress, wasn't she?
No.
No,
That's
Could be
POWs
an
have been
actress.
evacuated from Ashio
Who?
in Yokohama.
She.
No, she's a nurse.
Everybody
She's a
else.
nurse. She was helping.
We didn't have any nurses.
No, no,
No.
Oh, she was
when
there
you were-
helping.
When
Yeah.
you were evacuated.
Right, okay.
Trucks pulling out with POWs who have been evacuated from Ashio camp.
West, 90 miles west.
Of Yokohama.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't right. No,
That's
this doesn't right. I mean,
that's not
this
quite.
is way east of Yokohama or north of Yokohama.
North.
Yes.
So I think the
I
It
should.
was actually
well, there's not a.
west.
There's often things messed
Okay.
up on
Yes.
this website.
West.
But not
Yokohama was on
this
the
is south.
shore.
Yes.
Yeah.
This.
so
And,
Ashio is north.
Yes.
Northwest.
Northeast.
No, west.
Well,
Northeast would be out in the,
Which
yeah,
Oh,
maybe
shit.
it's, you basically
maybe it's
do north, pretty much.
mistaken for another city like Oyama or something. Because
Might have been.
Yokohama is down here. Yokohama is here.
Yokohama.
Here's Ashio.
Yeah, it's
Unless they meant Hitachi.
well, maybe
It's
it's
more than
slightly
90
west.
miles. No, it's more than 90 miles.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
We can
Oh,
actually, you can
Whatever.
log it in and the machine will tell you.
Like the
Click the dot.
is this interactive?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. It should be.
No.
Well, I think
No.
you took a copy of it. That's why.
Yes, I copied.
If you go, well, yeah, go back to that. Now click the 9B. Click 9B. Okay, so this tells you all sorts of interesting things about Asteo. Not, some things, and a lot of people in their memoirs and things they write down spell things all over hell. So you'll see all, and then go down on this site. This also has a geospatial, which you can find the map.
Who created this?
Well, it started by one very right-wing guy who was a little crazy, and now it's by a Japan scholar who's in who was a missionary, and who was a missionary in Kyushu and started doing his own research, and his research now is maintaining this site and he can do research in Japanese.
This is Mr. Underwood?
No, Mr. Underwood doesn't do this. This is a Mr. Wes Injured. He's a missionary, and his research is quite good. He's very thorough, and he has wonderful Japanese, so he's correct.
2,000 feet.
Okay.
And it was a lot messier than that, of course.
And a little bit lower too, right?
They're only about this high.
4-foot tunnels.
Thank you.
Now, I had more fun on one detail where I was chosen to be the dynamiter's assistant.
Wow.
So I had to open the box of dynamite and squat next to him. And when he'd request so many sticks, I'd have to hand it to him like a dental assistant.
Is he Japanese or?
Japanese
Vietnam?
minor, civilian. So he's taking those sticks of dynamite and he's connecting each one to the next with the fuse and shoving them down the hole. The drillers had already drilled a whole bunch of holes in the face. When he got them all in there that he needed, he thought he needed, the fuses were all wrapped together.
Yes.
And then he would suck on his cigarette
And
Come
lit
on,
the fuse.
show
and
it.
touch the fuse.
Right,
And I'm squatting next to him. Said,
And he was trained for this job too, just like he was trained for the other
and
job.
then you watch that fuse burning, and he'd say, "Mati, mati, mati, mati."
Wait, yeah.
And when he finally decided it was time to go,
Yeah.
he'd say, "Okay," and we'd get up and down the corridor as far as we could,
Yeah.
and then into a lateral off.
Right.
And just as we get there, inevitably, blam! And that explosion was coming right down next behind us.
Wow.
You could see it go by. Ruff! I think he did that for entertainment every time.
Oh, it's good there was never an accident.
Well, not to me, or I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, right. Did it happen to anyone else?
I don't know. I presume it must have happened occasionally. Yeah. So they got the way American workmen get occasionally frivolous in the safety rules on what they're doing, building buildings, for instance, or bridges. The hell with the safety code. Yeah, you know. They would probably play games.
Well, in hindsight, it was probably a very experienced.
Oh, he was a master dynamiter.
So.
Oh yeah. I got so I didn't really get upset.
He shared his lunch with you every day, too.
Woo! He would give me a few bites from his bento box.
Oh wow, that's special.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He was a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From the picture, we're shown the
Which one? Go back to
the
the.
POWs look in relatively.
Explain
ah,
why. Tell 'em why.
You were deceived as much as the American doctors were deceived when they first saw us on the dock at Yokohama.
Okay. So of course, it doesn't say exactly when the photo was taken. Was it immediately, or?
Well, when they were
No, no.
liberated, that's a. There's a.
We
time
were
period.
already filled with false fat from being stuffed daily with huge amounts of food.
Right.
And the body
It was-
just
That
put
fell
on
from
that.
the air.
It liberated in early September, right? So from
Right.
the surrender to the
When the first plane came
yeah,
over,
so
his
the
was-
Big Z had a daily.
Yeah, what
Feast,
was it,
I
2-3 weeks before they actually came
Oh,
and got
yeah.
you from the
Right.
camp and brought you back to
Right.
Yokohama? And
Yeah.
all that time, every day, you were getting bombed with food.
We were getting
from the
bombed
Americans.
with enormous quantities of food.
So you
we
feel-
were just stuffing ourselves.
So then you were back up to your
Where was
weight.
the photo?
So the American doctors saw these fellows who looked pretty good. Hey, man, it looks like they fed you well. And so the guy would try to tell them what really happened. And he'd say, "You're a damn liar." That's the American
So
doctors.
anyone look familiar there?
I couldn't recognize
Well,
it.
look.
No. It's too much of a blur.
Do they even look American or Australian?
Who knows?
Because there were Australian POWs there.
Oh, yeah.
You said that is an actress.
She looked like an actress.
So some.
Now you
No.
notice? Oh,
No.
Oh,
No,
wait a
it's a
second.
nurse.
It says trucks pulling out with POWs who've
Have
been
been
evacuated
evacuated,
from
yeah.
Ashio Camp, 90 miles away. We got right on a train right near the entrance to the mine.
Okay.
Remember, they hauled the copper out by the
Right.
trains.
Maybe this is once you got off the train, then did you get in trucks transported
Yes.
anywhere?
Do you remember?
Because they didn't
We
bring
were
nurses
already
in.
in Yokohama.
I know.
Yeah.
No, don't worry about what that says about Yokohama.
Right.
I'm asking you. When you got off the train, then were you then transported, got in the trucks and transported?
When we got off the train,
Yeah.
we were on the dock area
Oh.
in Yokohama, and we were deloused on the piers.
Mm.
And we sat one-on-one with the girls as they interviewed us, interrogated us.
Okay.
And all we had was a robe.
Do you ever remember getting into a truck anywhere?
No,
Okay.
Well, these might have been the Australians going to the Australian.
Yeah.
who knows?
Yep. Okay.
They maybe the Americans were taking one spot, and the Australians were put on trucks.
Couldn't tell you. I don't recall any Australians working near me, but I don't recall a guy who was working right next to me.
This is
Yeah.
Allied soldiers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everyone I did know
Does
in all
anyone
those
look
camps.
familiar? Look.
Just more photos. No, but he's right. Right there, nobody looks too
That
starved.
must be an Aussie guy.
But yeah, these soldiers definitely. but the
British,
prisoners.
maybe.
They look like New Zealand or Australia.
Mm.
But how do you know?
And it's the
clothes. That's why they're better dressed.
Yeah. and
They
drop
dropped all
food.
kinds of food, and they shared the food with the Japanese around them. The kids would come and get the candy.
You were just worried about surviving every day. You didn't really make friends and chit chat.
No such thing.
No.
They're all dead. Anyone that I remember knowing is gone. They didn't pass away, they all died.
Okay, we should. Do you guys have questions?
Yes.
You know,
would you want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, my name's Dee Wang. I'm a history major and junior student. Junior student. And this semester I'm taking Professor Yang's World War II in Pacific Asia, and that's why I'm here today, like to learn more about the POW in Philippines, like the part which I'm not that familiar with.
I didn't spend too much time either. And Matt?
My name's Matt Green. I'm a master's degree student, and I'm a Marine officer, so I just wanted to come say hello.
Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
he was a Marine for a while.
You on active duty?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you a grunt?
No, I'm a communicator.
Haha. Well, everyone better learn how to communicate.
There you go.
But you're first of all, what are you?
What's that?
First of all, what are you?
A Marine.
A rifleman.
A rifleman, yeah. There you go.
Right.
Were you in the Marines?
I was in the 4th Regiment from Shanghai
But
for a month
On Corregidor.
on Corregidor.
42.
No, this was May of 1942.
It was April to May.
April to May, you were
Yeah.
a Marine.
He was U.S. Army Air Corps. Then they bombed the fields, and then they moved them to become Army infantry on Bataan. Fought for 4 months. Then he swam from the tip of Bataan to Corregidor, 3 miles, and he washed up and to the Marine Corps. And so
He's washed up. Well, we were actually challenged on the beach as we came ashore. The beach was, rocks. And when the guard was satisfied we were Americans and not Japanese spies, he said, well, you're in the Marine Corps now.
that's how
So I was assigned to a fellow named Schaffner, Shifty, immortal in the Corps. He was a lieutenant.
Shifty Schaffner.
Schaffner.
The full name is
Austin.
I've got one of these.
And,
Austin Schaffner.
He ended up being what, general?
Yeah, he became General Schaffner.
Interesting.
And he was offered the opportunity when he escaped from a large Japanese slave camp with 9 other fellows. He wasn't the leader, it was a Marine major who was the leader. Schiffler, I think his name was, the major. And they busted out cleverly by pretending they were going to work, and they walked right by the guard at the gate and asked permission to go to work. And the guard said, no. Off they went, and they made it to a village, and the Filipinos radioed Australia, and a submarine picked them up, brought them to Australia, and they were interrogated there, which resulted in news stories enlightening the American people for the first time what happened in the Philippines. Before that, it was a dark curtain descended. It was a total blackout of whether we were alive or dead. Next question.
I know. I really think we got to move on before the sun sets so we can get
Is
some.
the sun still out?
I hope
It's pretty
so.
early.
Yeah.
you know, so-
So we should pack up.